My name is Angela Ross, 31 years old. The polished brass doors of the High Grove swing inward, and the hush inside folds around me like a cashmere wrap, the chandeliers scattering prismatic light over mahogany and linen. Floor to ceiling windows frame Lake Michigan, where the evening water glitters like spilled diamonds against a deepening sky. And for a heartbeat, I watch our reflections drift across the glass. My family, a moving constellation behind me, each star refusing the gravity of the others. "Miss Ross, welcome back," the general manager says with practiced warmth, stepping forward from the host stand. "Your private dining room is ready." I nod in thanks, and behind me, my father, Harold, stops mid-stride, his eyebrows making an honest attempt at his receding hairline. "Palmer," he says, out of old habit, confusion softening the name he still uses for me at home. "They know you here?" Before I can answer, my mother, Elaine, touches the pearls at her throat, the 35th anniversary gift she polishes when uncertain. "Must be a mix-up," my sister Marissa says, not bothering to hide the stage whisper. At 33, she wears her composure like a designer suit. Tonight, in fact, she is wearing one, the kind that announces its price before she does. Dylan, 25 and newly minted MBA, sweeps the room with a subtle inventory, his gaze totting up the imported marble, the stemware, the hushed staff whose steps make no sound. "This place must clear 7 figures monthly," he murmurs, pleased by numbers that behave. Connor, my brother-in-law, checks his watch in that careful way of men who'd rather not see the time at all if it confirms their suspicion that the evening is about to be expensive. "Right this way," the manager says, and we trail him past tables where Chicago's elite cradle wines most people only ever read about. The private door gleams like a secret. A small gold plaque reads, "Ross Family." My father's eyes find mine. I touch his arm. "Happy birthday, Dad." Inside, a chandelier falls in soft constellations over the table, place settings arrayed with military precision. Lilies, his favorites, breathe a clean sweetness into the air. We sink into plush chairs, and for a moment it's only silver and glass, and the slow unspooling of a night I've planned down to the smallest hinge. "This is very sweet," Mom begins gently, the tone she has used since college whenever I veered from a path she could easily name. "But is this sensible? You're still getting established, and places like this are so expensive." Marissa leans in as if we share a secret. "I could have gotten you a discount at Gaston's. Client connection. You should have asked." I drink some water and let the cool erase the old heat in my throat. The song is familiar, only the key changes. Last Christmas, Dylan wrapped a career advice book for me and highlighted a chapter about moving from freelance to full-time. And I smiled the smile you wear when the gift is really a mirror. "My apartment's closer than you think," I say, because the truth would be a kindness they might break between themselves. The apartment in Evanston is 3 blocks from the warehouse I signed when no one was looking. 3 blocks from the heartbeat of the work they still think of as hobby. "Still in that small place?" Mom asks. "Wicker Park has some nice affordable options." The sommelier arrives with the leather-bound list, and Marissa reaches for it with a reflex that predates adulthood. "Let me handle this, Angela." The message is embroidered into the gesture. I know what things cost. I know what you can't. I take the list with a smile that doesn't announce itself as resistance. "I've got it covered tonight." I skim the familiar pages the way you run your hand over a childhood railing you once used to steady yourself. "The Chablis Grand Cru 2018, please." Marissa's eyebrows climb like climbers who didn't bring a rope. "That's a $300 bottle." "It's Dad's birthday," I say. "Nothing but the best." Dad squeezes my hand, his expression easing into something that looks suspiciously like pride. The menus arrive and Dylan cracks his open and half chokes. "500 per person," he mutters, startled enough to forget discretion. Connor leans into Marissa, his whisper the volume of a small performance. I let the air pass through me and remember the point of the evening. Harold Ross is 61 today, and in this room I've gathered light for him and put careful hands on every detail. The server appears with our first course, butter-poached lobster, lemon beurre blanc, bright as a bell. I need to check with the chef about Dad's seafood allergy, I say to the table, rising with a reassuring smile. I'll be right back. In the corridor, the scent of saffron floats from the kitchen threshold. The server's pager buzzes, and he hurries ahead to alert the chef. I pause under a framed photograph of last month's gala, the kind of shot where the host stands centered while the crew is blurred in motion at the edges. In the photo's peripheral smear, there's a figure whose profile is almost mine. I look at the grain of it and feel the old and secret ache of being nearly seen. My phone vibrates. A message from my operations manager. VIP contract ready to countersign in the morning. Museum board wants final floor plan. And a second text, a service confirmation that makes me smile because the High Grove runs like clockwork when it matters. Voices drift from the dining room, their threads of familiarity tugging me back. What is she trying to prove? This place is ridiculous, Marissa says, crisp as a folded memo. Probably maxed out her cards, Connor's baritone adds, and in the silence that follows, I can hear him calculate the cost of his own certainty. She lives in a one-bedroom in Evanston, Dylan quips. Bye. He laughs, the same laugh he had at 12 when he'd find a way to corner me in games, shifting the rules while I wasn't looking. The words prick cleanly, not because they are new, but because repetition is its own kind of blade. She's always been thoughtful, Dad says then, quiet and firm. Let her do this. I stand still long enough to let his voice climb into me and anchor somewhere old. Back at the table, I smooth my face into its easy shape. Chef is preparing something special, I say, and the server sets down plates with the choreography of a stagehand who never misses a cue. Marissa's smile is made of concern and measurement. Is this really in your budget? We could go somewhere more appropriate. Her glance salts the room. China, crystal, silver, all assessed and found guilty of cost. We don't need all this, Connor says, loyalty shaped like a blunt instrument. Harold's fine with his usual steakhouse. The team approach is familiar. Marissa launches, Connor reinforces, Dylan supplies data that is really opinion dressed in numbers. What's new is the distance opening inside me like a quiet room with good light, wide enough to see the pattern without needing to stand in it. I don't rise to it. I focus on Dad, whose eyes close as the first bite dissolves, whose shoulders ease as if someone loosened a knot. Marissa's fork moves faster than her disapproval. I make 6 figures and wouldn't waste money like this, she says to the air, then accepts another pour of wine she just called wasteful. Dylan clears his throat. If you're trying to build a client base, you should pivot to corporate events. Stability. He says it kindly, and the kindness makes it worse. The server refolds my napkin with a precise flick. Is everything to your satisfaction, Miss Ross? He asks, attention landing on me with a weight my family is trying to ignore. Perfect as always, I answer, and he nods with a small spark of recognition I pretend not to notice. From the doorway, the manager glances in, registers me, and offers the discreet lift of a brow reserved for partners who have solved problems together behind kitchens where the air tastes of decision. Mom watches this exchange, her head tilting as if a picture on the wall has finally begun to come into focus. Dessert arrives for the table next to us, and somewhere a candle flares and someone sings off-key. The leather folio appears at the periphery of my vision, carried with that careful, quiet gravity good restaurants reserve for moments of reckoning. It hesitates near our table, then rests between my father and me as lightly as a verdict. I'll put this on my corporate card, Marissa says quickly, hand already on the portfolio, a mother again in a game we no longer play. We'll split it later. Angela can cover the tip, if that's not too much. Dylan smirks into his water. Connor chuckles just loud enough for other tables to hear, and the moment crackles like static, the kind that raises the fine hair at the nape of your neck before lightning decides what to do. I look at my father. The lilies exhale their clean, unarguable fragrance. The room is a field of small, deliberate choices. Salt cellars aligned, knife edges parallel, glasses placed so that when light enters, they answer it. I have built a life like this, detail by detail, refusing spectacle, courting excellence, letting results speak softly, and then keep speaking when I'm gone. For years, I have chosen concealment over distortion, truth in a quiet room rather than truth as a weapon. But love that asks you to hide is a kind of poverty, and I am done spending myself on it. I place my hand on the folio. The leather is warm from being carried, the way good tools remember the last hand that held them. Actually, I say, and it is astonishing how calm my voice sounds in the room where they keep deciding who I am. I've got this covered. The decision doesn't arrive like thunder. It arrives like a door opening on well-oiled hinges. Somewhere in the kitchen, a timer chimes and is gently silenced. I lift my eyes to my family, my mother's pearls trembling just slightly against her skin, my brother's calculations stumbling, my sister's certainty searching for a place to sit, and I feel the shape of the next hour click into place with the satisfaction of a key turning. It's time they knew. The sound that follows the words, "I've got this covered," is small, just the faint rustle of linen as the server steps closer. Yet in that instant, the entire room seems to still. My family stares at me as if waiting for a magician's reveal, an illusion to collapse, a trick to explain itself. I reach into my purse, fingers brushing against the cool weight of the black metal card I almost never use in public. When I set it down, the titanium makes a sound unlike any other, a soft, deliberate click that silences the room. For a heartbeat, no one speaks. Then Marissa laughs, too loud, too brittle. What is that? Some fake centurion card off the internet? Those replicas look so real now. I meet her gaze, unflinching. It's real. The server, Thomas, catches the card between gloved fingers. His posture shifts ever so slightly, shoulders straightening, tone softening. "Thank you, Miss Ross," he says, and I see it happen. The pivot, the subtle recalibration in how he addresses me. The rest of the table notices too. Dylan blinks. Connor's eyes narrow. Mom's lips part as if to speak, then close again. Thomas disappears toward the front of the house, but the air he leaves behind is taut. My family waits, suspended between disbelief and curiosity. Marissa folds her napkin with unnecessary precision. "Well," she says, her voice sharp as the edge of a glass. "I suppose we'll see if it works." "Marissa," Dad murmurs, half warning, half habit. 10 minutes stretch thin. I sip my wine and trace the rim of the glass with one finger, steadying my heartbeat. Somewhere in the dining hall, a cork pops, laughter drifts, and life goes on for everyone not sitting at this table. Thomas returns, but not alone. A woman in a tailored black suit follows him, her expression calm yet deferential. "Miss Ross, we apologize for the delay," she begins. "For transactions above a certain amount, Amex requires a brief verification call." Marissa leans towards Connor, whispering in a tone that wants to be secret, but isn't. "I told you, this is so embarrassing." I keep my composure. "Of course," I say smoothly. "Please proceed." Thomas inclines his head. "Thank you, Miss Ross." He steps away again. I can feel the weight of 7 eyes pressing on me. Dylan breaks first. "You know, Angela," he says, voice light but edges brittle, "if this is some performance to prove you're doing okay financially, you don't have to—" I interrupt softly. "That's not what this is." He stops, startled by my tone. The silence that follows is interrupted only by the low hum of the restaurant's ambient jazz. Then, across the room, I see Daniel Alvarez, the general manager. He's in his early 40s, his posture carrying quiet authority. Recognition flickers across his face when his eyes find mine. He approaches. "Miss Ross," he greets with a warmth that's both professional and personal. "I should have realized earlier who you were." Marissa blinks. "You know her?" Daniel's smile deepens. "We've worked together before. Ross Signature Events produced the United Healthcare Gala here last spring. It was one of the most flawlessly executed nights this establishment has ever seen." Connor looks up from his phone, frozen mid-scroll. Dylan's jaw slackens. My mother presses a trembling hand to her pearls. "That was you?" Dad asks, disbelief and dawning pride warring in his voice. "Yes," Daniel says before I can answer. "Your daughter runs one of the top event production firms in Chicago." Thomas returns just then, leather folio in hand. "Verification complete, Miss Ross. Transaction approved." He places the receipt before me, his voice carrying a new respect. "The authorization code is A6J9Q2. Marissa's mouth opens, then closes again. I sign the receipt and add a generous tip, the motion practiced, unhurried. Daniel gestures to another server, who approaches with a silver bucket, cradling a bottle of Dom Perignon. Please accept this, compliments of the house, Daniel says, a token of appreciation for your continued partnership and as an apology for the delay. I nod graciously. Thank you, Daniel, that's very kind. As he withdraws, the weight of revelation settles across the table like fine dust. My family doesn't yet know what to do with it. Dylan's gaze darts between the bottle and me. Marissa stares down at her plate, the muscle in her jaw twitching. Finally, Mom exhales, her voice a whisper. You work here? With them? I take a slow sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp and alive on my tongue. No, Mom, I say gently. They work with me. Connor, ever the skeptic, forces a laugh. You mean like freelance coordination? Marissa elbows him under the table, her composure unraveling thread by thread. Connor, stop. Dad leans forward, eyes bright. Angela, I don't understand. You plan events? Yes, I reply evenly. Large-scale corporate and philanthropic productions, gala fundraisers, medical summits, museum openings. Ross Signature Events handles full concept to execution logistics. We've done work across 17 states. The numbers land like quiet detonations. Dylan's brows knit. You're serious? Marissa recovers enough to ask, and this company, it's yours? I nod. Founded it in 2019. Started with 2 part-time assistants and a leased warehouse in Evanston. Now we have 47 employees and contracts through next year. No one speaks. The tension that once hummed with judgment now hums with shock. Daniel passes by again, pausing just long enough to add, and for what it's worth, Miss Ross, the governor still mentions that gala. Then he moves on, leaving their stunned silence in his wake. Connor clears his throat. So, all this time you've been working, I finish. Just not the way you imagined. Marissa's eyes glisten with something I can't name. Part wounded pride, part reluctant admiration. Why didn't you say anything, she asks, voice barely above a whisper. I meet her gaze, because I didn't need to. The waiter returns with the Dom Perignon, pouring it into crystal flutes. The bubbles catch the chandelier light, tiny constellations rising. I raise my glass first, breaking the silence. To Dad, I say, and to family. My father swallows hard before lifting his own glass. To Angela, he murmurs, voice trembling, for always surprising us. We drink. The champagne tastes of victory and bittersweet clarity. Marissa sets her glass down carefully. You could have told us, she says again, softer now. I smile faintly. Would you have believed me? The question lingers, gentle but unanswerable. Dylan looks at me with a new kind of scrutiny, analytical but edged with respect. Ross Signature Events, he repeats slowly, as if testing the shape of the name. I've seen that logo before. Connor shifts uncomfortably. His phone lights up again, a search result glowing against his palm. Oh my God, he mutters, showing Marissa the screen. Her face drains of color. On it, a headline. Ross Signature Events named among top 5 corporate production firms in the Midwest. Her lips part, then press together. You're successful. The word lands like an accusation and an apology all at once. I'm fortunate, I correct her. Mom's eyes shine. Why didn't you tell us, sweetheart? I trace the condensation on my glass. Because I wanted to be loved for who I am, I say quietly, not for what I've built. Dad studies me for a long moment, then nods slowly, pride and regret mingling in his expression. You've built something extraordinary, he says. The words warm me more than the champagne ever could. Around us, conversation in the restaurant resumes. Life flows back into the room. The tension hasn't disappeared. It's simply transformed, reshaped into a silence dense with realization. Marissa leans back, eyes unfocused. All those times we thought you were struggling, she murmurs. We were so sure. You weren't wrong to think it, I reply. I just never corrected you. Dylan gives a low whistle, equal parts awe and discomfort. And that card? It's real? Very real, I say, smiling faintly. But it's just metal, Dylan. What matters is the work behind it. Connor clears his throat again. So, you're the one who ran that Continental Healthcare Summit last year? I nod once, and the Art Institute Gala next month. He leans back at a loss for words, a rare sight. For the first time all evening, my family doesn't have advice. They just listen. I glance at the lilies in the center of the table, their scent rising softly through the golden light. This dinner began as a birthday. Now it feels like something else entirely. A reckoning, a small resurrection. I don't gloat, I don't need to. The truth sits between us. undeniable and simple, reshaping what family means one breath at a time. And though I hadn't planned it this way, I realized that tonight, in the quiet aftermath of revelation, something inside me unclenches. The years of shrinking myself into the version they could love have finally ended. I take another sip of champagne, watching the city lights shimmer beyond the glass. I suppose, I say softly, breaking the silence, we should talk about what I actually do for a living. Every head turns toward me, and I begin. When I finally begin to tell them, my voice feels steadier than I expected. Ross Signature Events started in 2019, I say, fingers circling the rim of my glass. I was 25, working 18-hour days at a small logistics company that didn't know what to do with ambition unless it wore a suit and had a title. Dad leans forward, curiosity eclipsing the leftover confusion. You quit? I was laid off, I admit. They called it restructuring. I called it a beginning. Mom's brows knit together. But you didn't tell us any of this. I shake my head. I didn't tell anyone. I used my savings to rent a half-empty warehouse in Evanston, 2 folding tables, 1 printer, and a second-hand MacBook. My first clients were small tech startups, Brightware Solutions and Nexus Innovations. They wanted product launches that would impress investors without looking like they'd mortgaged the company. I delivered both events under budget and on time. Dylan whistles softly. Under budget for startups? I smile. Turns out creativity thrives on limits. He leans back, thoughtful, calculating again, but in a different tone now. And then? 6 clients the first year, I continue, 15 the second. Then came Continental Healthcare's annual leadership summit. That event changed everything. It put us on the map with Fortune 500 companies. Connor frowns slightly. I remember that summit. It was all over LinkedIn. Yes, I say, letting the memory unfold. That was us. The table goes quiet. The air feels charged, the way it does just before a storm shifts direction. I never realized how big you'd gotten, Marissa murmurs. I didn't want you to. Her eyes flash. Why not? Why would you hide something like this? I take a breath, watching the candlelight reflect in her glass. Because when I started, I didn't know if I'd succeed, and if I failed, I didn't want the family's pity. Then, when it did start working, something changed. You all had already decided who I was. The struggling artist, the one still trying to figure it out. It was easier to let you believe it. That's not fair, Marissa says sharply. No, I agree, it isn't. For a moment, no one speaks. The weight of honesty sits heavy between us. I remember Thanksgiving 3 years ago, I say, my tone softer now. When I mentioned landing the Northwestern Medical Conference, Dylan laughed and asked if I was still doing those little parties. Marissa, you told me to apply at your firm for something with benefits. Marissa's cheeks flush. That's not... It's fine, I interrupt gently. I didn't hold it against you. But after that, it was just easier to stay quiet, to protect what I was building. Dad's expression shifts again, from pride to regret. We should have asked more, not assumed. I nod once. Maybe, but I should have trusted you enough to tell the truth. Mom's voice trembles. We failed you, didn't we? I glance at her, eyes soft. No, you just didn't see me clearly, and I didn't give you the chance. A server refills our glasses, his hand steady as the mood in the room changes. Outside, rain has begun to fall, a fine shimmer across the glass windows, like silver dust sliding down the city. The sound fills the silence that follows, gentle, unhurried. Marissa finally speaks again, but her tone is different now. You could have trusted us, Angela. I study her face, the lines of tension that have held for years beginning to loosen. Could I? I ask quietly. You once said you felt sorry for me because I didn't know how to network, that I'd never survive the business world. She winces, guilt flickering. I thought I was helping. I know, I say simply, but pity doesn't sound like help to the person on the receiving end. The room seems smaller now, the candlelight more intimate. You've built something incredible, Dad says suddenly, his voice steady again. How big is it now? 47 full-time employees, I reply, and we hire dozens more on contract for large events. Last year, we produced 78 events across 17 states. Our projected revenue this year is around $52 million. Mom's hand flies to her chest. $52 million? I nod, before taxes. Dylan's MBA mind kicks in like a reflex. So your profit margin must be around 24%, I finish, smiling faintly. We reinvest most of it into the team and the logistics hub. Marissa lets out a shaky laugh. That tiny apartment suddenly makes sense. The apartment is 3 blocks from the warehouse, I explain. I kept it because proximity matters more than prestige. Dad chuckles softly. Excellence in every detail, he says, repeating the mantra he drilled into us as kids. You remembered. I built my business on it, I answer. His eyes glisten, and for the first time that night, his hand covers mine. I'm proud of you. The words land with a quiet, astonishing weight. For years, I've built empires out of silence. Tonight, they crumble under a sentence. Mom wipes a tear from the corner of her eye. I wish we'd known sooner. I shrug lightly. You would have worried, or tried to fix things that weren't broken. Marissa exhales, a small laugh through her tears. That sounds like us. Connor finally speaks, his voice measured. You know, we actually came tonight planning to talk to you about your career. We thought we were being helpful. The admission surprises me, but not as much as the vulnerability in it. You were going to stage an intervention? I ask. He nods sheepishly. Something like that. Well, I say, smiling faintly, consider it canceled. Even Dylan laughs this time, quiet but real. The tension cracks open just enough for warmth to seep in. Daniel Alvarez reappears at that moment, carrying a bottle of dessert wine. Miss Ross, he says, placing it before me with practiced grace, the 2015 Sauterne. A small thank you for the trust you've always shown us. Thank you, Daniel, I reply. Marissa watches the exchange, her composure softening into something more human. He really respects you, she says quietly. Mutual respect, I answer. That's how things work when no one underestimates you. She looks at me, eyes bright. I think I owe you an apology. No, I say gently. You owe yourself some grace. We all do. For a long moment, no one speaks. Rain patters softly against the windows. The candles flicker, reflections trembling across the polished silver. Dylan finally breaks the silence. I never gave you the credit you deserved, he admits. I thought success looked one way. Suits, titles, numbers. Turns out it can look like lilies and light. I smile at him. It can look like a lot of things. The quiet that follows isn't awkward. It's peace, fragile and new. When dessert arrives, molten chocolate souffle and vanilla bean layer cake, Dad laughs softly. Best birthday ever, he says. Best family dinner yet, I answer. For the first time in years, we eat without armor. Later, when the plates are cleared and the check already settled, Mom touches my arm. Promise me one thing, she says. Anything. Don't hide from us again, even when it's good. I look at her, the woman who taught me grace under pressure, who mistook my silence for failure because she wanted to protect me from disappointment. I promise, I say. Outside, the rain stops. The city glows, clean, renewed, reflected in the dark waters of the lake. Somewhere deep inside, something that's been locked for years finally exhales. For the first time in a long while, I feel seen. And it's enough. The rain had stopped by the time we stepped outside the high grove. The city shimmered beneath the streetlights, every raindrop on the pavement catching fragments of gold and white. My parents walked ahead of me, arms linked, their laughter soft and uncertain, like people learning to speak a language they'd forgotten they once knew. Behind them, Marissa and Connor argued quietly about parking validation, and Dylan lingered near the valet stand, thumbs flying over his phone. I stood there a moment, letting the cool air cut through the warmth of the restaurant's perfume. Everything felt lighter, but fragile, like glass that hadn't yet cooled after being shaped by fire. The next morning, my inbox overflowed. Event schedules, supplier quotes, a new contract draft from a museum board I'd been courting for months. My assistant had left a note on my desk. Congrats on surviving family night. I laughed out loud. If only she knew. Over the next few weeks, the dinner at the High Grove became a quiet pivot in my life. Nothing dramatic happened. No movie-perfect reconciliation, no teary family montage. Just small shifts, the kind that matter most. Dad called me once a week to ask about my projects. Mom started sending recipes again, the way she used to when I first moved out, and each message ended with the same line, "We're proud of you." Even Marissa surprised me. One afternoon, she sent an email with the subject line, "Collaboration idea." Inside were 3 words, "Let's work together." I stared at it for a long time before replying. Maybe. I wasn't ready yet, but I was open. That was new. A month later, the museum gala I'd mentioned finally came together, a swirling masterpiece of orchestral music, floral installations, and polished donors pretending not to network. As I watched from the balcony that night, champagne flute in hand, I spotted a familiar face in the crowd, Marissa, standing beside our parents. She'd come uninvited, wearing one of her immaculate suits, watching me with an expression I hadn't seen before. Not envy, not confusion, just understanding. Afterward, she found me backstage. "You really are the best at this," she said quietly. I smiled. I had a good teacher. Her brow furrowed. "Who?" "Dad," I said simply. "Excellence in every detail, remember?" She laughed softly, brushing a tear she pretended wasn't there. We didn't hug, but something in her eyes told me we'd stopped keeping score. Weeks passed, and the company grew faster than I could track. We landed a new pharmaceutical client and expanded into the West Coast market. My team doubled. Yet, despite the whirlwind, I found myself making time for family dinners again. Small, ordinary Sundays filled with laughter, burnt lasagna edges, and the rare peace of people learning to know each other for the first time. It was during one of those dinners that Dad made his announcement. "Your mother and I," he said, grinning across the table, "will be celebrating our 36th anniversary next month, and before any of you protest, Angela is not allowed to plan it." Everyone laughed. I pretended to agree, but even then, I already knew he was wrong. 2 weeks later, I called in my best team. The event had to be intimate, yet unforgettable, a private celebration worthy of the people who'd built me, however imperfectly. We booked a restored Art Deco theater downtown, all curved balconies and gilded ceilings, the kind of place where light bends beautifully against history. On the night of their anniversary, everything ran with quiet precision. Candlelight danced across mirrored walls. Soft jazz filled the air. My parents stood at the center of it all, surrounded by friends, old colleagues, and the 3 children who had finally stopped pretending they weren't a little proud of one another. I stayed near the bar, watching the event unfold with a kind of awe. My staff moved like clockwork, each cue perfect, each transition seamless. "That's Palmer. Sorry, Angela Ross," I heard someone whisper nearby. "She runs the top event firm in Chicago." The words didn't sting anymore. They didn't even surprise me. They just felt true. Marissa approached, carrying 2 plates of chocolate souffle. "Tried this yet?" she asked, handing one to me. "It's ridiculous." I smiled. "You helped plate desserts tonight?" "Don't sound so shocked," she said, laughing. "Turns out I'm good at logistics. Who knew?" Across the room, Dylan stood with one of my operations managers, notebook in hand, asking real questions. Not patronizing ones, but curious, thoughtful ones. Connor chatted with the catering director about sponsorship tie-ins. For once, no one was performing. When the speeches began, Dad tapped his glass for silence. "Before I say anything," he started, "I want to thank my daughter." He looked at me, eyes wet under the soft light. "Angela made tonight happen, and she made it beautiful. But her greatest gift wasn't this party. It was letting us see her, truly see her." Applause rippled through the room. I didn't cry, but my throat tightened in a way that reminded me I could. I took the microphone, smiling through the shimmer of lights. "A month ago, I showed you what I do," I said. "But tonight is about who we are, together." I raised my glass. To family, to honesty, and to finally being seen. Dad echoed softly. To Angela, and to family. As the crowd toasted, I caught sight of a young woman near the catering line, a server maybe 23, moving quickly, her eyes sharp but uncertain. I'd seen that look before, competent but unseen. After the event, I found her tidying glasses near the back door. "You were incredible tonight," I told her. "You managed service timing perfectly." She blushed. "Just doing my job, Miss Ross." "Don't hide your excellence," I said gently. "It doesn't make you safer. It just makes you smaller." She looked up at me, startled. "How did you know?" I smiled, because I used to think the same way. I handed her my card. "Call me Monday. Let's talk about your future." Her eyes widened. "Thank you, ma'am." "Don't thank me," I said softly. "Just don't disappear." When I returned to the ballroom, the band had shifted to a slow tune. My parents swayed together under the amber light, smiling the way people do when they finally stop pretending the past didn't hurt. Marissa raised her glass from across the room, and I raised mine back. A silent truce. Maybe even love. Later, when the guests had gone and the lights dimmed to a soft glow, I stood at the center of the room, surrounded by the echoes of laughter, music, and clinking glasses. For the first time in my life, there were no masks left to wear. The next morning, I stood in my new office, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the skyline. Family photos now lined my desk beside business awards, no longer separate worlds, but one complete story. My phone rang. It was Marissa. Sunday dinner's at my place this week, she said. Don't be late.
I won't, I promised.
When the call ended, I looked out over the city that had once felt too big, too cold, too dismissive.
Now it felt exactly right.
I smiled, unguarded, uncalculated, free. Because sometimes success isn't the loud revelation under chandeliers. It's the quiet moment afterward, when the people who once doubted you finally see you for who you've been all along.